Welcome back to Tech Talk with Craig Peterson. As we do every Sunday at this time, we have our Apple expert with us. Her name is Rebecca Kraemer, and the Ask an Apple Expert segment is brought to you by Small Dog Electronics. They are Manchester's #1 source for Apple products and repair. They're right there in the Mall of New Hampshire. Good place to go visit. Look at devices, bring them in, ask your questions. And in fact, that's what we'll be doing today. We're going to talk with Rebecca a little bit about their trade-in programs and some of the new apps out there for iOS from Google. There's a number of them, and we may get into a couple of other questions that we had this week as well. Rebecca, welcome to Tech Talk with Craig Peterson.
Thanks, Craig. Happy to be here.
Well, there is a lot going on. Apple just keeps making headlines after headlines out there. This new iPad really sounds like it's the cat's meow. How are they going to be able to outdo themselves with the 4th generation iPad? This thing's incredible.
It really is incredible, but they somehow find a way to outdo themselves every year, and we're so excited that we finally have all of the models of the iPad in stock.
All right, so you can go in and not only look at them now, but you can actually buy them in the store.
You got it.
And when we're talking about all of the models, we're talking about everything that goes from, what's the smallest model? 8 gig, I guess, and the biggest is 64? How does that all work?
Yep, exactly. So it's actually, it's the 16 gig, and then we've got the 64, and there's the 32 is the mid-range.
And the difference between these when we're talking about the gigs here is the amount of storage on them. And really that has to do with how many videos and how much music or other documents people might want to have with them.
Right. So the average user is normally fine with that 16 gig. That's someone who's going to be checking their email, doing some browsing, have some apps, and a limited amount of music and pictures. That 32 is going to be more for people that want more with the photos and more with their music. And then the 64 gig is great for people who want to both carry a lot of video and probably play with that new movie app to make some videos of their own.
Oh, and there's some incredible apps out there now. It's really neat to see what they've been able to do. So you have them available there in the Mall of New Hampshire. Now, for people who aren't familiar where you're located, you're kind of down just a little bit from the food court.
We are, exactly. If you follow the signs towards Best Buy, we're actually on that same corner that they're on.
Okay, and there's a whole bunch of equipment in there. You'll see it. It's where, I guess it was the Discovery Store was in there before, if you're one of the old people around here like myself. And you've taken over that whole space, and you have a lot of stuff in there. We've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. I think one of the things that a lot of people are itching on, in fact, it's probably one of my top questions here, Rebecca, when it comes to the new iPad is, I really want one, but I can't really afford it. But why don't you tell us a little bit about this trade-in program?
Right. So most people are like me in the sense that a new product comes out from Apple and they want that new product, even if they have the old one and the old one still works. And so what we've done is we have a great trade-in program. You can bring in your old iPad. We also take old iPods. We take old computers. Pretty much the only thing we can't take right now is iPhones, and that's just due to how they're linked with the different cell providers. But you just bring it in, leave it with our service department. We do a little evaluation, and then we'll give you some store credit towards your next purchase.
Okay, so you can get a few bucks out of it. I know that's really expensive. When you're talking about that high-end iPad, you're up in the $800 range. The low end is where is that at now?
Well, we still have those iPad 2s at $499, but those iPad 3s are going to start you at $599. Okay,
and the iPad 2 is plenty for almost everyone out there. But once you get your hands on this 3rd gen, you're not going to want the 2nd gen. But
exactly,
it's nice to see that those are still available, that you can still buy them, so you can get in there. You can use them, as we mentioned before on the show, they're being used more and more for business. In fact, Small Dog has been involved with helping to develop applications for business and others, so that you can use them whether it's on the floor of a showroom or it's on a truck as you're loading and unloading. There's just so many applications for them, and you can save some money by kind of getting the last generation of the iPad out there. We're speaking right now with Rebecca Kraemer. She is a director of IT consulting over at Small Dog Electronics. Of course, they handle everything to do with the Apple, and we're talking about not just an Apple computer or an iPad, but everything, the desktops, the beautiful iMacs. In fact, the newest iMac out there right now is Apple's fastest computer currently. Just some amazing stuff. So when they walk in the store, they're going to see the kind of the cash register. If they want to trade in, trade up, do they just talk to anybody in the store?
They would just head right to the back of the store. We've got a beautiful big service counter. It looks like a bar. We're still waiting for that liquor license. And they can just sit right down there and go ahead and give their device to the repair technician. And one nice thing is if you have a bunch of equipment at home that you've just kind of been sitting on, you can stack that credit. So I've had people come in with a couple old iPods, an iPad, and their old Mac, and we can definitely work out a deal for you with that.
All right, so you can go and you can get them. Now, let's talk about why you might want to have an iOS-based device. So why don't we kind of start out, Rebecca? Explain to us what is iOS and what are the devices that use it?
Sure. So iOS is Apple's mobile operating system, so similar to, though I'll say superior to, things like Windows Mobile, Symbian, Google's Android. So it basically puts the full power of your computer operating system into a portable device, something like an iPod, an iPhone, or an iPad. The beautiful thing there is the convenience of having something that fits in your pocket or fits in a small bag that you can whip out when you're on the road to give you directions, check your email. It's very easy to travel with. Most of these have a much longer battery life than a laptop. So, for example, I took a trip to Spain back in October, and the iPad's 10-hour battery life got me there. I was able to watch video and play games while I was sitting in the airplane, and also get my work done, which is a good thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you can use the iOS on everything from you mentioned the mobile platform, but from the iPod touches that are there through your iPhones and your iPads. And the software that's available for iOS usually runs on all three, although there can be differences.
It's true. There'll be some minor differences. For example, there are some applications that really take advantage of that large screen with the iPad. So things like Apple's version of Keynote for the iPad is going to have some different multi-touch gestures than the version of Keynote they have for the iPhone. You normally can still find apps that work on both devices because, as you mentioned, it's the same operating system. The core of it is basically identical, but certain applications are just going to take advantage of the screen size and the features a little bit more depending on the device you put them on.
Now let's talk about Google here. You mentioned Android and how iOS, in your opinion, is superior to Android, and in many ways I agree with you. I think it is. But Google hasn't restricted themselves to the Android platform when it comes to all of their tools and services and apps now in this case.
Right, that's true, and that's one of the most common things that we hear when people come into the store and they're trying to decide, do I want to buy an iPhone, do I want to buy an Android device? And usually the thing is that people don't realize that they can still use those great Google applications on the iOS platform. So I am a Google Mail user. I love my Google Docs. I use Google Talk and Google Voice extensively. My business phone number is a Google Voice number. And I'm able to do all of that on my iPhone. For a while, Apple wasn't allowing Google native applications to be listed on the App Store. There was a little bit of a disagreement between Apple and Google about that. And Apple realized that there's a huge demand for it. I mean, Google really does write some beautiful applications, and they give a lot of them away for free. So there is a large market there, and Apple decided to open up their device to it. So for example, if I want to make a call from my Google Voice number, I just go ahead and open up my Google Voice app on my phone. It looks identical to my iPhone app, and I make the call, and then the person on the other line sees that the caller ID is coming from my business line as opposed to my normal cell phone line.
That's nice. That's like having a second phone number that you can use on your phone.
Yeah, it really is. And the only restriction with that app in the iOS is that it will use your cell carrier's minutes for something like that. So on an iPhone, no big deal. But if you are on an iPad or an iPod, things that don't have things like a cell phone data plan, then it's not going to let you make outgoing calls, but you can get all of your Google Voice voicemails, and you can take advantage of the free SMS.
Oh, and if people aren't familiar with Google Voice, one of the things I like the best about it is the fact that it will transcribe voicemail messages and will send them to you. And you can listen to them in the app, and it even shows you the words as you're listening to it. Incredible flexibility.
Exactly. That's one of my favorite things about it, because I always get calls when I'm on the road, and if I don't recognize the number, I often won't take it. So it just quickly gives me the transcript, and I can just glance at my screen and see if it's a call that I do need to call back, or if I can wait until I'm parked somewhere.
Now, there are a few other apps that are available, and maybe we can get into talking about them a little bit more next week here. Their new IM, the whole Plus thing that Google has, Authenticator. There's just tons of different apps. I think there are a lot of questions people have about them. So next week, Rebecca, hopefully we can get to some of those.
That would be great, and I really encourage people to go ahead and email us with those questions.
All right, and again, the place to go online, you can go to WGIRAM.com. Keyword there is small dog. Ask your questions there. I've gotten a few directly myself, and so I kind of steer the conversation in that area, but we'll forward them back and forth here to Rebecca over at Small Dog Electronics. You've been listening to the Ask an Apple Expert segment. It has been brought to you by Small Dog Electronics. They are Manchester's #1 source for Apple products and repair right there in the Mall of New Hampshire. They currently have the new iPad in stock. They will take your old iPad, your old iPods as well, and Macs in trade, so you can bring it in, have them have a look at those devices, and they'll give you some store credit that you can then use to get the latest and greatest. We've been joined by Rebecca Kraemer. When we come back, of course, a little bit more here about the latest technologies in our lives, and we'll be back probably with Rebecca same time, same place next week. Stick around. We'll be right back.